Yeah, that's right, guys. 60 days, not a lot of time, so lawmakers are going to be very, very busy. You can kind of call it a sprint, not a marathon. And again, we want to bring in one of the leaders for the Democrats, Senator Manka Dhingra is here with me today, and thank you for being here for the conversation. So as far as, we talked about the 60 days, you heard it, you know it. Do or die, what are the major topics, what major bills that you want to push through? And again, both chambers controlled by the Democrats.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. A large focus last year was also on housing, and that is going to continue to be the focus: affordability, housing, taking a look at the opioid crisis, mental health, especially how it's impacting our children. Those are all big issue items. We always want to make sure that we're taking care of our climate, protecting our planet, and so it's going to be a lot of great work in a very short session.
Yeah, you chair Law and Justice. One of those issues are important to you. What can you promise people who are saying public safety is one of my #1 priorities? They are not feeling safe in their neighborhoods, or not feeling safe when they go out. What are you going to do about that this legislative session?
We've been doing a lot of work around public safety for quite a few years now. It starts off by making sure that we have law enforcement on the streets. The Senate or the legislature actually made sure that we now have regional training academies all over the state instead of just having the one criminal justice training commission. So there was a ribbon cutting in the Clark County area just a couple of days ago. We've already had a class graduating from the regional training academy that we've done in the Yakima Valley area. We've had 30 graduates already. And so making sure we have these officers trained and ready to hit the ground is key on making sure that we have that level of enforceability. We are continuing to work on making sure we're protecting survivors of gender-based violence, domestic violence, sexual assault, trafficking. We've done quite a bit of work on catalytic converters. So the list goes on, but there's a good, robust sets of bills to make sure that we are providing protections for Washingtonians. I will say a huge part of the problem is also the backlog that we heard from prosecutors and defense attorneys and the courts. We've heard from some jurisdictions where prosecutors have over 1,800 cases that have yet to be filed.
So how do you solve that?
A lot of that is around making sure we can hire prosecutors and defense attorneys and make sure we have judges to go through that backlog. So we do have Senator Torres, who has prime-sponsored quite a few bills around defense. We're going to be talking to prosecutors as well to see how we can make sure they can attract talent and retain them. One of the biggest problems we've heard about is the fact that, unfortunately, in the criminal justice system, there isn't a work-life balance that people can find in the private sector. And especially after COVID, we've seen a lot of people choose to leave the public sector to work in the private sector to get more flexibility around work-life issues. And I think that is a reality for so many people.
One issue that is really important for a lot of people right now, as you have seen and familiar with, the police pursuit law. It was reformed a couple of years ago. A lot of people pushed back on it, saying that police officers are too restricted from going after the bad guys. I know that there was an initiative that people wanted to talk about. You were not supportive of it. You were not a fan of loosening restrictions. Wondering how you feel about that issue now, because one example that we're getting a lot from people are stolen vehicles. Police officers can't go after stolen vehicles, cannot pursue them. But right now we know those stolen vehicles are used to commit very, very violent crimes, and it's happening every single day. Have you had a change of heart maybe on that issue? Will you allow officers to go after stolen vehicles?
So I want to make sure we're very, very clear on where people stand on this. For violent crimes, law enforcement can do pursuits. That is what the law is. That is not something that's new. Now, when the House bill originally came about a few years ago, that policy was based on current law enforcement policy from a lot of cities and counties in our state. This was not new policy. This was policy that already existed. And last year, the Senate sent a bill out that actually modifies that pursuit policy even further and is more permissive about chases. So I think there's a narrative here that needs to be clarified on what is actually going on.
The narrative that we're hearing from are the people who are on the ground, right? These are officers who are doing their jobs, and they're saying it's hard for them to do their jobs because it's not clear on when they can go after stolen vehicles, because sometimes they can and sometimes they can't. What they're finding is that a lot of these minor stolen car thefts are turning into something bigger, where they're going into crash and grabs, or they're involved in shootings later. And story that we hear a lot is, if we could have gotten those stolen vehicles then, it did not have to lead up to those violent crimes. So again, coming back to that question, do you feel like police officers should be given the right and to go after suspects a little bit easier than they are now?
I think law enforcement has to make sure they're modernizing their techniques on how they are conducting their job, their investigations. And you have seen the advent of technology really help in that regard. I know the city of Redmond actually bought GPS trackers that have been very effective. City of Spokane has bought drones. So we really have to make sure we are doing that balance between protecting innocent bystanders' lives as well as making sure you're holding people accountable. And that balance is something that people have struggled with for years and years and years. A lot of the stories that we're currently hearing about, it has not been made clear to many of us whether those would have even been allowed under the policies from 4 years ago. So it's really important when people start talking about public safety is that you really pay attention to the details. What are they saying? Would this policy have been in place even before the state took action on this? And on the vast majority of cases, the answer is yes. Nothing would have changed in so many of these situations, regardless of what the legislature had done.
It's all the time that we have, but you know what? I want to further this conversation another time. Thank you so much for giving us your insight today.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And you guys, that is, Senator Manka Dhingra again. She's from the Redmond area. You talked about the law and justice issues that are affecting our state. We're going to have more conversations with lawmakers coming up at the top of the 5 o'clock. For now, back to you guys.